serial killer food critic who kills and eats her ex-lovers. So family fun. And it came out in January. I really need a tissue. Sarah, you have a tissue. And it came out in December of 2020. And thank you. And it did really, it's done really well, at least in the US and in Poland for no apparent reason. So my publisher asked me if I would write this standalone short story for a thing that the American booksellers put on every year called Indie Bookstore Day. So this is the standalone short story that I wrote. It's not in the same universe, but it's a story that I knew would make the kids happy. I did it for the kids. And it's the story of a OkCupid date. It takes place in like 2014 that goes spectacularly wrong for a young man named Shad and some women.
Shad Taggart.
I
even just hated saying that name. Shad Taggart. Kind of just nervous.
Yeah. And so that is, that is this.
Excellent. I'll just read.
And it's not available anywhere outside of the U.S. except here.
That's very
so.
Like here tonight.
Like here tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I have copies.
The only copies.
Yeah, so like you could definitely sell it on eBay. Like for certain you could sell it on, because there are a bunch of kids in this region who,
Yeah. Make some grocery money.
for sure.
I kind of love that. Sometimes as an author, it's really nice to see some of your books be like hawked on eBay for like exorbitant prices, like a galley or something, because you're like, oh look, like it's somehow increasing in value, even though you're not sure is someone really gonna buy like an out of print book for $300? I don't know.
And yes.
But the internet says that's what it's valued at. All right, I'll read a little bit just from the opening pages, I think. Okay. There's a little bee. Okay. The factory is a fertile body, each breast a beginning. I make geometry of the meat, and that keeps my mind in line. Calming, comforting tenders, and perfect fingers. My pneumatic scissors make sense of the mess. It's 3:50 a.m. when I arrive on the floor in my sexless scrub top, and number 5 is pissed. I slip on my disposable arm wraps, then tie my plastic apron behind my back. Everything that drops into our section is mostly peach with pale yellow lumps of fat. Thank God there is no blood. When I'm not at work, I remember moving the length of my fingers over each smooth breast, feeling for the catch of bone or a string of tendon against my latex glove. Number 5 catches me missing a breast and shouts. I look up, then cut faster to catch up. Trembling flesh flops and tumbles down a conveyor belt at 140 birds or more a minute, and I cut and throw the pieces into wide emerald vats to be sorted. It's hard to focus, and sanitizer fogs my eye protection. This morning the sky was July clear, and as I walked through the glass doors glittering with dawn light, I knew something was different. Couldn't stop squeezing the skin of my stomach. In the locker room, I pressed my hands deep into my hips, searching for the nubs of my pelvis through the surrounding paunch of my sore, spongy fat. During first break, I swallow back the nausea warming up my throat. I step outside and walk past the rows of parked cars, the sun barely rising, and the constellation fading out in the north. Mama calls it the Northern Cross. God is watching over us, she would say. But when I moved out and got the internet, I looked it up. It's not a cross, but a swan in flight. The air outside is normally swollen with blood and animal waste, but today it smells earthy, like wild grass and fresh milk. The mild country across the highway is peppered with paste-colored double wides, old barns, twine bundles of hay. Our factory nestled neatly between that and a few acres of chicken farms, if you can call them that. Oblong, warehouse-sized huts with thousands of clucking broilers breathing in their shit. We're the kill station, the biggest poultry supplier to Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. first break is over, workers sort into their sections like marbles rolling toward one uneven end. Number 3 shows up next to me. Good morning, number 4. I nod and cover my nose with my paper mask. My hunger prods, and pressure in the muscle of my jaw below my tongue makes me salivate. A bloat sits below my belly button, achy and full. I try to remember the last time I bled. 3 weeks, maybe. It's never been regular. Sometimes it takes months, but always I'm thinking, she's here again, inside me. An alarm rings and the assembly line clunks on, first from the adjacent warehouse rooms, then ours. Air hisses through the hose of my scissors, and I ready the blades by slicking them open and shut a few times. For the rest of the day, I cut and cut and cut.
It is Friday, and we are meeting to worship. Callista is bringing her famous Gigantes Plaki. Ask as often as you like. She'll never reveal the recipe. The most she'll say is that fennel is the secret to cooking beans. But we all know that. Whose refrigerator is without fennel? Only that of a barbarian. Don't think the wrong thing. There's no fuddy-duddy proselytizing for us. Join us in our religious devotions or not. It's no skin off our leopard print hides. You wouldn't look at us and think that we're lips deep in religion. We don't wear our sleeves to cover our elbows or our skirts to cover our knees. We slip our feet into our high heels, one stiletto at a time, just like any other woman. But we contain multitudes, and we mean that literally, not merely in a song of myself metaphorical sense. There's nothing demure about the lipstick we wear, and we tend to favor more or less the same shade of scarlet. Together, we have felt the singular ecstasy that comes from prayer and from religious sacrifice. It sets us apart. We think it sets us above. For without faith, what is a human? No more than an animal with a FICA score. We believe it's our obligation as sentient beings to give over to God and let Him move through us. In God we trust, for God we must. Through God we lust, with God we thrust. And I get a little looped. Teeth, check. Pits, check. Butt, balls, and back, check, check, and check. Socks, in clean, intact, and matching, check. I couldn't find my favorite underwear, the heather gray Hugger Gripper briefs from some Swedish sustainable fashion company, whatever that means. They were an Instagram impulse buy one insomniac night. I decided I'd go commando. Chicks dig commando. It says bad boy. Commando looks spontaneous, even when you've planned it. Commando, especially under broken-in button-fly jeans, says you're a man who puts his dick forward. You're hot off the block at the pop of your Levi's. You're feral and you're fearless. Commando says you can take the boy out of Missouri, but you can't take the Missouri out of the boy.
That's so good.
It's not called the Show Me State for nothing. Almost a decade ago, I moved to New York City from Palmyra, Missouri. I was too much for Palmyra, a charming, dumb, small town just out of Hannibal, which, sick name aside, is a piss-poor excuse for a city. After living there 20-something years, Missouri was a snore fest, but I missed the wild, wide-open blue of its skies. I miss that illogical frontier feeling that lingers in Missouri, despite the reptilian crawl of traffic and big box stores. I miss the smell of rain blowing through the cornfields that once pressed up against my dad's split-level ranch. The fields don't press so much anymore. Less corn, more suburban sprawl, too many cul-de-sac couples raising their 2.5 kids, too many even for the moribund Midwest. Let's just call it there. Anyway, you goes on a date.
That was amazing. Thank you. So I guess I wanted to start off by commenting on the fact that an excellent host is dedicated to Taylor Swift, and I wanted to talk about that for a second. In the acknowledgments of the letter at the end.
So this is a short story followed by something I call an acknowledgement essay. So it's somewhere in between acknowledgments and a mess and an essay. So
Yeah. You wrote, there's a huge roiling ocean of young people who feel complex, contradicting emotions and will never ever shut up about it in the best way, right? Like it's kind of like a thank you to those, like we want those voices. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your decision to dedicate the piece to Taylor Swift.
Yeah. I wrote this story in 2014 after a guy named Shad ghosted me. It was just the voice of the women. And then as I revised it for Unnamed for this short story, they asked me to include the voice of the man. So while I was writing it in 2014, I was, heartbroken and pissy. And so I was listening to 1989, like on infinite repeat. And then as I was rewriting it, it was just after, just after the Eras tour had finished in the US, but before it started, in first in Japan and then, in Europe. So I was listening to a lot of Taylor Swift because Taylor Swift was fucking everywhere. You could not avoid Taylor Swift. So as I was rewriting it, I started to think a lot about Swifties and this, group of people who go in and have this ecstatic experience in a group with this larger than life figure. So part of I dedicated it to two of my friends with whom I've drunk a lot of wine and to Taylor Swift with whom I would like to. Part of it is tongue in cheek, part of it was just sort of savvy marketing, I know my audience for this book. And then part of it was also this was really the touchstone from that linked 2014 to 2023 when I was, revising this piece. The things that I really appreciate about Taylor Swift, aside from, this swelling fandom, is that she's messy and she's complicated and she is, a